Andrew Argue.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Bean Counter Podcast. I'm your host, once again, Andrew Argue. Today, I'm in Clearwater, Florida with Nancy Ridenour of PDR CPAs. I know her from a few years ago when I was the president of Beta Alpha Psi. She came in and spoke, and so I thought I'd have her on the show. Nancy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So give us a little bit about your background for those of us that don't know you out there.
Okay, I'm going to start with my hometown and my age. I'm 56 years old, just to put that in perspective. I'm from a small town in Illinois, Quincy, Illinois, one of 6 children. I was the 4th, and when I was born, my mom had 4 daughters, 3 and under, 3, 2, 1, and a newborn. 2 more followed. So grew up in a large Catholic family in the Midwest. Went to Bradley University initially. For those of you that don't know, that's in Peoria, Illinois. Met my first husband and got married after my sophomore year, after being a music major, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and changed my major to finance when I found out I was a hard worker as opposed to a talented musician.
So you went to a different college in Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I always struggle with music too. I've always loved to play, but I don't have the ear for it.
I'm left-handed.
Okay.
And so I'm a creative accountant. So found out I was musical before I found out I was an accountant. But did a degree in finance at the University of Wisconsin. Started my family right away and was a stay-at-home mom for 13 years. I have 3 daughters. I pursued an accounting profession when I went through a divorce, and back in late 1980s, decided to go back and get my 5th year of accounting at the University of South Florida, and pursued the CPA exam at the same time, taking classes and then traipsing up to Georgia to take the exam and then come back and finish up. So I kind of entered the field probably in a more unusual framework. I had been at home for 13 years, knew I needed to make a good living, and thought accounting seemed like the way to do it. Mm-hmm. I finished in 1992, could not find a job in public accounting, so I went to work for Bisque Publishing and did CPA review and CPE materials for a year while I pursued a public accounting degree.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you're probably aware of this, but they just sold that company a few weeks ago. Isn't that right?
I just heard that, yes.
So yes. It's eventually it won't be called Bisque CPA Review. It'll be called something else.
Something else. Yeah, I guess so. That was an interesting time because technology was just booming at that point in time, and they were starting to do online coursework, and that was very new at the time. So writing the responses to questions and that sort of thing was just becoming computerized. Mm-hmm. So it was probably an exciting time in that industry, just like it is in public accounting.
Yeah.
But I always wanted public accounting. I used to drive down US 19 down to the St. Pete campus of USF to take classes at night, and there was a sign, Price and Donahue CPAs, and I used to look at that sign and say, I'm going to work there someday. And after several years, I did get a job there. And the Price and Donahue became PDR, which was Price Donahue Ridenour. So I became a partner after about 7 years. Wow. So I've been with only one firm and a small local firm to boot. So that gives me a unique perspective, I think.
How long were you at Bisque? You said you were there in 1992?
Just a year.
Okay.
And as long as it took me to find a job in public accounting.
Very nice. So then after that, you've been at PDR ever since? And
yes,
now
I have.
you're a partner. That's awesome. Well,
yes.
Congratulations on that. I mean, that's a great story.
Thank
it's interesting that you started so later on in your life, not straight out of university. You went and were a stay-at-home mother first.
Right.
That's great. So the first question I always like to start off with is if you could tell us about one experience in your career in public accounting that you were really happy that you chose this as a career choice.
I think one of the things I found, and this is what I call an opportunity, industries change, and I think when you're with a small firm, you have the ability to change and be flexible in response to what's happening in the environment. And I'm an auditor. Most of what I do is on the audit and assurance side. We did skilled nursing facility audits. And in 1997, the Balanced Budget Act came in and changed Medicare reimbursement for skilled nursing facilities. And what that became for me was an opportunity to immerse in an industry and become an expert because everybody was learning, everyone were learning new rules. Mm-hmm. The rules had changed dramatically. They went from cost reimbursed system to a prospective payment system, or what they call PPS system. It changed the whole playing field in the industry. And what that became was an opportunity for us as a small firm to start doing Medicare cost reports reports and Medicare reimbursement consulting. And because everyone was learning a new type of reimbursement, there were opportunities for education, there were opportunities for change. Everyone was new to the industry. So I found that one opportunity to get into a niche or an industry that was easy to do because everybody was learning a new way of doing it.
That's great. When did that happen again?
That was the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, and it started for cost reports in 1998.
Very nice. Very nice.
It's a long time ago.
No, it's interesting how you mentioned, there's a shift in the regulation and whatnot. So now it's like, well, who's going to be the emerging, expert in our area that's able to do this? And then you were able to do that. So I think
I think we as CPAs need to always be looking at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an opportunity.
One of the questions we ask people who come on the show, sort of to humble them when they've done well, show people that it's sometimes a tough road along the way, is what's one of the failures that you've had over the years?
There are so many. The biggest failure was thinking I could go into public accounting after not having been in any industry for 13 years. That was a challenge for me. I went back to school. I took 2 to 2.5 years to get, over 30 credits and sit for the exam. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't pass the exam, and I did pass, but what never occurred to me is I wouldn't find a job right away.
Yeah.
And that felt like a failure. I know it was because I was a single mom. I know it was because of the economy at the time. Still felt like a failure. And I think one of the things I learned from that is you just keep moving forward and you keep making that one next decision to get you to where you ultimately want to be.
I'm so happy to have you on the show. And one of the reasons we do the show is to showcase all the different ways that you can go through accounting. You don't have to just have gone to school and then go into public accounting and become a partner. Obviously, you have a very different track. So when you went to BISC, but you knew you still wanted to work in public accounting, how did you eventually get that opportunity to make a shift into public accounting? What was it that you did where you finally were able to get that job?
I watched, as I said, I used to drive down US 19, for those of you that aren't from Florida or from the Tampa Bay market. It's the big north-south network in the Pinellas County area. When I drove by and saw that small firm, it just touched me. It was close to home. I knew I wanted public accounting. I knew I would probably end up in a smaller firm. So visualizing that was the firm I was going to work at one day, I kept networking to find people that knew of the two partners there, Bill Price and Kevin Donahue, finding out they had been Arthur Anderson and, they had an Arthur Anderson background. So finding other people that were at Arthur Anderson at the time and asking questions and networking in a very subtle way, because I was so busy with young children and an hour commute over to Sable Park. But I continued that visualization of that's the firm I'm going to work at someday.
That's awesome. Was it eventually a networking connection where you met one of the partners? Or?
Yes, it was. And they had an ad in the paper. So once the ad was in the paper, I made a few connections and got a couple of people to call for me. They didn't know me personally, but they knew family members and or friends that knew of me. So
that's awesome.
So it was that whole networking connection thing.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's very off the beaten path. It's not the normal track, so I appreciate that. Now, tell us about what one of your biggest challenges has been as a partner, and how have you been able to overcome it?
Challenges in the industry, I think, are as a woman, are continual. I know from experience as a single parent, and I'm now very happily married. I've been married for 18 years and have a wonderful second marriage. But as a single parent, what I realized and what I foster within our firm is single parents make excellent employees because they need their jobs more than anybody else. And they're very loyal to their employer. They're very loyal to their job because they need that paycheck more than anyone. So I think my focus has been over the last 20 years, and now I have 3 adult grown children, and they're successful in their own rights and ways. But what I've found is fostering a nurturing relationship with the women in our firm to make sure that they succeed has become one of the challenges in public accounting that I still don't think we're doing a very good job as an industry, that we need to do better.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies have tried, it sounds like, But, sometimes you actually speak to the people that are going through those programs and whatnot. And they're like, yeah, I'm on a flexible work arrangement or something like that, but I end up working even more or the same as what I normally do. So I feel like that's something that people have tried at, but there's been maybe a lot of failure in that area for a lot of other firms.
Well, and I think there has. And this summer at the AICPA not-for-profit conference in Washington, D.C., Anna Maria Chavez from the Girl Scouts was the keynote speaker. And she was amazing because she talked about the statistics that, women are graduating in record numbers. They're at the top of their classes. They're going into their careers. And 3 or 4 years down the road, when the promotions are happening, which for us in public accounting would be making senior, then making manager, well, the women aren't there anymore. So where are they going? Right. So that piqued my interest. I then downloaded the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg and said, okay, I'm going to read this book. And it's not about me. Lean In is not about me. It's about the generations that are coming after me.
Yep.
But what it is about me is what can I do to empower them to make their careers their priority.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I look back with regret is the fact that I became a stay-at-home mom right away, as opposed to trying to do both, trying to somehow or other keep a career in there, keep my academic studies or get a job or a part-time job and keep my fingers into something. Because 13 years later, when I had an unfortunate divorce and realized I was going to have to support and put through college 3 young women, I was behind the 8 ball and had to catch up. So that is one of the biggest messages in public accounting is we need to keep women in the industry happy, fulfilled, and successful in their jobs. And we also need to allow men to have that family side of their careers as well.
I've been writing an article for this publication, and it's sort of on the same topic of, women working and Lean In. And I want to ask you a question. So do you see, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've read the book Lean In, I haven't had a chance to read it. It's a lot of it is focused on putting a lot more of the ownership on women to take more initiative for themselves and to maybe push a little bit harder than they have in the past, rather than just wait for things to happen for them.
Yes, and to develop a partnership with their partner or spouse, so that it's not just them taking on the duties at home, and you could even say it's not so much leaning into the career or leaning into the family, but leaning out into the world, and what can they do to be this more well-rounded, successful person.
And so what has been your experience in that regard? You started later on in your career, but you've been able to be a partner at a CPA firm. So what would you say in terms of you having to have leaned in? Do you think that's what made the difference for you, rather than maybe some other people that are maybe started in public accounting but still haven't been able to?
I do. I think to have it all, I think you have to work harder and smarter than anyone else. And that's where people lose sight on that working harder and smarter, and they want to focus on one or the other but don't want to have to focus on both. And you have to you have to be leaning in on both sides, both the family and the career.
I like that phrase, work harder and smarter. So the next question I want to ask you is about resources. I like to ask people, what are they using to accumulate and gain knowledge? Is there something that you read, a publication, or is there a course that you've taken or something like that that's helped you?
With age, I've gotten a little sloppy on that. But I like to call it personal professional development, and I hope that everyone in our industry, whether they're in college or in their first job or looking to go to their second job, that they set aside some time for personal professional development. It's not just about reading the accounting standards. It's not just about reading the tax regulations, but what are you doing to become the better person, the better professional, the better individual, and frankly, a happier individual. So I always have that personal time that I set aside. I know one of my managers who I am thrilled with, she's wonderful. She uses Sunday mornings as her time. And she develops and devotes at least 4 hours on a Sunday to doing that personal reading. And for her, she's always been on the audit side. Coming to a smaller firm, she recognizes we have to be able to talk about everything. She's also using that time to hone some tax skills, to get some general knowledge of tax skills and tax reading, as well as self-improvement, motivational books, that sort of thing.
No, that's great. I like the idea of having sort of a commitment that's set aside. Makes sense. What is your biggest piece of advice for someone that's just starting out in their accounting career? Especially coming from you, where maybe you wanted to work at a CPA firm, but hey, you went to BISC and then it ended up working out. But what would be your advice for someone, right out of the gates?
I think having mentors at various levels throughout your relationship, whether it's a professor that you've identified with. I have someone from USF, Selena Josie, 20 plus years later. She and I still have a relationship, and I go in and do one of her classes once a semester or once a year, and she and I stay in touch. She was a tremendous mentor to me. I think as a mother, she recognized that I was a little unique back when I was back in school. So I think continuing to have mentors and relationships throughout your life, that sometimes they start out where it's teacher and student, and then as you progress, it's all of a sudden she and I are about the same age and in about the same life cycle relative to, when are you going to retire? What are your plans after you retire? So having those people in your life that you trust is critical to me.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I actually met Professor Josie, just the other day. My fiance went to USF. I didn't go there, but
is she an accountant? Your fiance?
She is. She works at McGladrey in Fort Lauderdale. But I met her through some friend connections. We actually ended up going out for dinner with another guy that I'm starting the company that I'm working on with. And so we all went out to dinner and just talked to her. But she's a great woman. I'm glad you brought her up. She was very, very nice. We went to her class before and spoke to them and whatnot. So
I'm sure they loved it, and she will. They will be tested on that.
Yeah, I know.
I like that
funny.
about her.
After the class, all these people came up to me and said, "How do you spell your last name?" I was like, "What is going on? Like, everyone needs my information." Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. Now, what about for someone who's a little bit further on in their career? You said you were able to make partner after 7 years. Someone that's been working for 4 or 5, 6 years. What's your advice for them?
I think making sure that you like what you're doing, and I think doing that self-assessment. If you are in public accounting and you maybe haven't gotten promoted yet, or it doesn't look like you are going to get promoted, really ask yourself, do I like doing this? Is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? I think we have to really love what we do, but I don't think our career necessarily has to define us. It's great if it does, but it doesn't have to. So make sure you like what you're doing and make sure you're in the place where you want to be. And again, asking other people what they did or how they did it. And sometimes some of the best advice I ever got when I was going through my divorce was the best revenge is getting on with your life. And I think what that means is if you are in a difficult situation, whether it's a job that your boss doesn't appreciate you or a marriage that you're not appreciated, sometimes just moving on with your life gets you in a position where you find out you don't even have to worry about forgiving that person because you've moved on and you're in a better place because of it.
Yeah. I appreciate you've been so open, about your whole life, personal life and professional life, how the two have sort of tied together and affected and influenced each other the whole time. So I appreciate that. Now, we always end off the podcast with the same last 2 questions. And the first one is about a book. What's a great book that you've read? I know you mentioned Lean In, but if there's something else that you would recommend to anyone out there.
There's another book. Lean In is the best one I've read this summer. There's another one I read several years ago. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the author, but it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's a book on professional development. And it talks about the skills that got you this far in your career are not what are going to get you into that top leadership role that you would want. So I would highly recommend that.
Yeah, and I think that, it's funny, I was actually writing on this exact same topic as well the other day because I just by the title of that book, I think it makes a lot of sense because I think a lot of people, the way we did well in university or the way we did well sort of in the lower levels of your job, not only aren't going to get you to the next level, but sometimes they can hurt you if you're trying to still maybe follow directions in the same way that you were always be told what to do rather than taking some level of initiative and whatnot. So I'd be interested to check that out. The last question we always ask is if you could share with us a quote that you love and has helped you reach your goals.
And honestly, the best revenge is getting on with your life. It changed my life. And a Catholic priest told me that a lifetime ago. And it empowered me and freed me up to do what I needed to do to be successful and fulfilled.
Well, thanks again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you again. And if people out there want to get in touch with you, they have a question, based on the podcast, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn or email? Or
I'm on LinkedIn. Email is also great. Ridenour, NRIDENOUR @ pdr-cpa.com.
Perfect. And I'll include the links below
Awesome.
whenever anybody sees the podcast, so that's perfect. Thanks
Thank
again so much for coming on.
Thank you, Andrew.
If anybody has any questions for me, you can reach me at andrew@thebeancounter.org. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.